Welcome to Professor Wright. You have a voice, let's find it. And welcome back to Professor Wright. I am the Professor, D.A. Adams, and this is video number 4. When we left off last time in video number 3, we left off talking about the 3 stages to the writing process: pre-writing, writing, and rewriting. In this video, we're going to pick up with pre-writing and start with the very first step to this stage. Whenever you sit down to start any writing project, no matter what it is, the very first thing that you should do is audience analysis. You have to know who your audience is to be able to reach them. Now, let me give you an analogy here to explain this. If you've ever thrown darts, or maybe you're a pool shooter, you know that you have to be able to see the board or see the table to be able to hit it. You would never try to throw darts in a dark room. You just can't do it. You can't see the target. You can't see what you're trying to hit. The same thing goes with audience analysis. If you sit down and try to write without thinking about who you're trying to reach, you have very little chance of actually reaching them. You may get lucky and you may hit a bullseye, but more than likely you're just throwing darts in the dark. What you need to do is turn on the light and think about who you're trying to reach, and that will give you a better chance of actually reaching them. So let's talk about audience analysis. There are 5 questions that I'm going to give you that you need to ask to think about your audience. Now, eventually you'll get to a point where you can do this in your head without even really thinking about it too much. It becomes second nature to you. But in the beginning, when you're first starting out, it's a really good idea to write this stuff down. Think about who, if you're writing for class, think about who your instructor is, who assigned this particular paper. And go through these questions and write the answers down, and that'll help you to focus the points that you want to make in your paper. If you are trying to be a professional writer, you always have to contemplate your audience. If you're writing a book, you need to know who you're trying to reach with that book. That will shape everything else that you do throughout the entire manuscript that you're sculpting. The first question that you need to ask is very simple. Who are they? Are they young? Are they old? Are they male? Are they female? Who are they? What is their socioeconomic background? Get a clear mental picture in your head of who this audience is. This is going to help you to shape your message. It's going to help you to define what it is you want to say. Get that clear mental image in your head and keep it there while you're writing, and think about that. There are things that very specific audiences want that you need to provide for them, and if you don't, then you're going to miss the target. The second question that you need to ask is, how much information does this audience need? Some audiences need more than others. Let me give you a couple of examples here. Let's say you were at work and you were needing to write a memo to your boss explaining that your computer just died and you need to get a new one. Depending upon how much your boss knows about computers, you may or may not need to go into detail describing what happened to the computer so that they know why it's important that it needs to be replaced. It depends on how much that your boss knows about computers as to how much you're going to have to describe to that person. On the other hand, if you're writing that same memo to technical support, you're probably not going to have to give them a whole lot of background about what a computer is and what makes it tick. They probably know it better than you do, and you would insult their intelligence if you tried to add too much information in there explaining what was wrong with it. They just need the basics. They'll diagnose it themselves and either replace it or fix whatever's wrong with it. The third question that you need to ask and contemplate is, what is your purpose in writing whatever this is? Now, there are 3 main purposes, and you will always have one primary purpose that you need to focus on. The first one is to inform. This is very simple. Are you just trying to convey information? Are you trying to get a point across to the audience so that they clearly understand the information that you're presenting? That's the first purpose that you can have. You may also be trying to persuade. When you try to persuade, you are trying to change either a behavior or a thought in somebody else. If your main purpose is to persuade, that's going to be a completely different kind of writing project than one that is meant to be informative. And finally, the last purpose is to entertain. Something that is meant to entertain is going to be completely different from something that's meant to inform or persuade. Now, in any writing project that you do, you're typically juggling all 3 at the same time. but one of them is your primary purpose, and you need to focus on that. If you're trying to entertain people and you're spending half of your time preaching at them, trying to convince them to change their mind about something, you are going to miss your mark. They are not going to be entertained. You have to entertain them first, and then maybe sneak in some persuasive stuff that can change their mind about something. But you need to know before you start the writing project which of these three purposes you are trying to fulfill. And that will go a long way to helping you to shape your message and to know all the steps that follow after this one, after audience analysis. All the other steps are going to revolve around the answers that you come up with here. The next question that you need to ask is, are there any obstacles or objections that I need to overcome with this audience? Now, this can be very simple. Let's go back to our computer analogy. Your computer's died at work and you need a new one. The number one obstacle you're going to have to overcome there is your boss does not want to spend the money because that's going to come out of the bottom line. If you do not think about that ahead of time and have an understanding that that's going to be an obstacle to your point that you're trying to make, you will fail in your message because they're going to shoot you down without even really thinking about it because you have not addressed their most important concern. You always have to think about what obstacles or objections you might have before you start any writing project. Now, the fifth question that you need to ask is, what are the audience's expectations? And this has to do with style, grammar, vocabulary. What is the audience expecting from you? And every audience is going to be a little bit different. Some audiences, if you're writing this for class in college, most likely your audience is going to have pretty high expectations. They expect you to have a strong grasp of grammar. They expect you to have a pretty strong vocabulary. They expect you to be above average in those areas. If you don't live up to that, your grade is going to reflect it. However, on the other hand, if you're writing other projects, if you're at work and you're writing a memo for somebody, they may not have the same high standards. And if you're spending a lot of time and energy worrying about whether or not you've put your comma in your right place, you may be wasting your time because that audience does not have that expectation and they don't care. Think about the audience's expectations ahead of time, and it will help you to shape what it is you want to say. Always know your audience's expectations, or you may not know them, but think about them. If you have to, if you really don't know and you have to guess as to what their expectations are, a good rule of thumb is always overshoot the mark rather than undershoot it, because people will forgive you more quickly for being too formal than they will for being too informal. So think about your audience's expectations and shape your message accordingly. All right, so those are the 5 questions that I want you to go over. Who are they? How much information do they need? What's your purpose? What are your objections or obstacles that you may have to overcome with this audience? And what are their expectations? To give you an idea of just how important understanding audience is, I want you to think about the last party that you went to, whatever it was. You're going to sit down and write 2 letters about that party. The first letter you're going to write to your best friend. Think about what you would say to your best friend about that party. The second letter that you're going to write is going to go to your grandmother. That's a completely different letter. And that's how important understanding audience analysis is. If you do not think about them ahead of time, you're throwing darts in a dark room. If you do think about the audience ahead of time, now you have a chance to reach them. Okay, so now that's enough about audience analysis for now. Now it's time for fish cabinet number 2. If you do not know what a fish cabinet is, you need to go back and watch video number 2 and keep up, because these are very important. Again, I cannot force you to do them, but just know if you do not do them, you're not going to be getting as much out of the lecture series. For fish cabinet number 2, I want you to think of a writing project you have already completed. Consider the audience for that project and answer the 5 questions for that audience. Make sure you write down your answers. Do not just think about it in your head. Have them written down, and this will help you to focus and concentrate. If you can go through these questions on an audience that you've already written for, now it'll make it a little bit easier when you go to write for an audience that you haven't written for before. That's fish cabinet number 2. That brings us to the end of video number 4. And when we come back for video number 5, we're going to pick up and start talking about some more activities that you can do to help you gather ideas before you start writing. So for now, I am D.A. Adams. Thank you for joining Professor Wright, and I'll see you next time.